Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jan Segerstam. I'm the strategy director of a company called Enerim. We used to be called Empower IM, but since June last year, we've been acquired by capital investors Klar Investment Partners and are now working together on international growth on issues not so far from what we've been developing here as well. So what I'll do is I'll be presenting shortly some of the results that we've been discovering in the DECENT project, and also I will talk a bit about the background. So we've studied what it means to have a cross-commodity energy market environment. When we look at the optimization of heat and the optimization of electricity, it's one thing to look at the optimization from a technical point of view, and then like we just heard on the electricity part, we can take a look at the market part as well, with the implicit and explicit demand response scenarios that were just presented. Now, when we look at the energy market as a whole, it is comprised of a very structured environment. It used to be that you would have suppliers and DSOs and messaging between them for consumption on metering points, and the underlying market would operate only on the wholesale level with TSO connected resources and large production. Now, this is no longer the case, so we're seeing a much more complex environment where the data exchanges are forming around either national information exchange structures or national data hubs, whichever. From a business standpoint, it's actually the same thing. From a technical standpoint, there are multiple differences. So in that kind of environment, when we look at the emergence of local resources and local flexibilities, they will have multiple ways of generating value. So there's the local value, and then there's the wholesale and public retail value of both the load and the generation at metering points in the energy network. So when you optimize between the heat part, which right now does not constitute a market in itself, but could be a local market, which is something that also was discussed here in the DECENT project. Then we have the electricity part, where you can also have a local market, but you also have the wholesale market. So what we were looking at and what we were working with was to work with the valuation and allocation that benefits the entire energy system, i.e. looking at giving the information for the local market on what is the opportunity on the overarching market, and also then receiving the information from the local level on what is the situation, what could be done, what is the available flexibility, how could that be used, so that the value equation for looking at the local value and the wholesale value and the value between commodities, that is heat and electricity, that actually can be calculated upon. So in this rather complex environment, we are the link between the energy management and the market, if you will. And then we of course also have the local smart contracting working on a peer-to-peer basis, which was done by the partners here in the project. So we were also collaborating on interfacing with that. So if you look at the value, you need to look at both the wholesale and local value together in order to see what is the actual value of the commodity. When you look at that, we also discovered that when you look beyond what we've been doing in the DECENT project, there's a point in looking at how we could link the bids between the different commodity markets and have structures that would be interoperable between the different commodity markets, um, so as to basically allow a heat market to form, where you also allow an energy, or let's say electricity market to be exact, to form. Um, if those bids could be linked, and the let's say market mechanisms would work in unison, then there would be even better opportunities to achieve liquidity, which is also an issue when we look at price formation in markets. So um, when you then have all of these markets and the different opportunities, you, after the transactions, end up looking at, well, how do you settle all this? Um, and that's where we're coming in, so that we can enable these kinds of local entities, or local marketplaces, or local communities to do their thing and then be part of the overarching mechanism, so that when the local entities interact between each other and also affect the balance position of the balance responsible parties who are providing the balance energy towards that community, that can be taken into account. Um, there's obviously multiple ways of dealing with this, and different energy providers have different kinds of products to enable this on the retail level. But it's also possible to just directly connect to the wholesale world by becoming a party yourself, and that's something that we can also enable. So that's why we're interested not only in the trading part, but also the settlement part of the transactions, where the value is traded between the different participants. So if you then look at the local scope and the peer-to-peer trading, smart contracting will allow this to work in an efficient way, and I believe we're going to hear more about that from the other partners today. Um, Here, what's important is that we have the right data there, so that we can come up with the value when we go up in the value chain to the wholesale part as well. So that's why we've interacted, so that we understand what is actually part of the information exchange. And that brings me to the integration and value distribution with market data exchange. Sorry for the Finnish details in the picture. The picture is basically about the different data exchanges between the different entities when we look at day ahead and intraday market interchange. And this interchange is important, so that we can provide the value on multiple levels. So if you participate in the day ahead, then once you get the information on what is the value on the day ahead and what is the situation on the day ahead, you can then make your decisions for the intraday. Like we heard in the previous presentation, you can basically work with getting price information and then adjusting your loads or generation accordingly, and that's all well. Um, but in some cases, depending on whether you do it with the knowledge of your service provider or not, you might induce a situation where there is a discrepancy in the intraday. So imagine, if you will, a case where there's a very high day ahead price peak, and everybody says yes. Oh, oh, this is a good signal. I will now turn off everything, and everybody actually turns off everything, meaning that then we end up with a spike in the other direction, because it's not really about a set uh, uh, level. It's about being where you're predicted to be, and if you're not, the electricity system, that is not in balance, and therefore you have to have balancing actions, which are then paid on top and incur costs done. So that means that having activity and having capability on working on multiple levels of different markets and taking into account the different value opportunities is important for the grand scheme of things. If only a small handful of people act and just optimize against one price signal, that's not a problem. That's fine. There's no problem with that because it kind of goes out in the statistics. But when you start to instigate it on a more systemic level, then you need to take into account how the system actually works in the background for the pricing and the reasoning for the signaling in order to keep the actual energy system stable. So we see that there's much to do in the future as well. I mean, we got important insights in this project on how we could work in the cross-commodity environment and link that to the market environment in a good way. But we feel that working on true linked markets for the physical electricity and heat would provide very interesting topics for future European research, specifically in the countries where we have established heat networks, because they can operate generally as a large energy storage that can be taken into use as a flexible resource when we see the electrical renewables as exhibit a lot of volatility. So there's a lot of value there to unleash. Um, Also, we need to look at the different value drivers. So how do we identify the kinds of value drivers that together provide the optimum value for different situations, which let's say in a region with constrained TSO connections could be very different from a region where there are constraints in DSO level connections, which is again very different from an area where you have a good network access, but you have less access to generation resources that are controllable, uh, and so on and so on. So looking at the cross commodity space and in that light would provide even more opportunities to generate value in the transition that we're working on, all of us, in transforming the energy system, and there's still lots to do. But I think the Descent project has been a very good delving into how to work with a market-oriented heat electricity approach, and it's been a very interesting journey for us with all the partners. But that's basically it from me, um, and I will stick around for any questions. But then towards the end, in about an hour, I will need to hop into another meeting as well. But feel free also to send me any questions in either in the chat or just ask. Thank you very much.